teach me about piano and teach me pidgin, and I would visit the various stations and meet the other priests. And when I got off St Joseph at Tubiana, there was a truck waiting for me to take me to Coromira, because Miltrup was going on holidays and Duffy was replacing him, and I couldn't speak a word of pidgin, and I went to Coromira and was in charge of everything. That's the way they did things then.
And did you have long hair? You had long hair.
I did have long hair.
He used to get around on a motorbike, and he had long hair down like this. And
when we were young.
Mum, I think Mum and some people were organising. There was, I don't know whether it was Billy Graham or somebody, but you know, it was like the Jesus priest was coming into town. The hippie priest with the hair down here on the motorbike. You were a bit notorious.
So I didn't really, because Franz Miltrup left the next day to go to Germany. And so I didn't really get to know him. And then Duffy went to Tubiana, and I'm left at Coromira by myself, can't speak a word. And so I didn't get to know Franz until he came back from holidays. And then we all got on, you know, over the years, I got to know him very well and to love him. And of course, we all were a real mixed bunch, as you remember. We had guys who fought in the German army, who then became priests, like Springer, Nick Kutlas, Hilton, God, I've forgotten his name now. You know, quite a number of American soldiers. Before the war, they were all trying to kill each other. After the war, as priests, we all got on well together. A whole mixture. And I must say to all you Bougainvillians, how you welcomed us all into your hearts, and whenever I'm with you, I feel I'm with family. Now, I'm not as much family as Chris, because she was probably conceived on Bougainville, born in Rabaul, came back to Bougainville when she was 2 weeks old, and is really, you know, a Bougainville girl, whereas I came there as an adult. But Chris's family and my family both have Mackay, and Brendan's family also have Mackay connections. So our families go back, and etc., etc. Now the next person I want to tell you about is Kevin Curley. Now Kevin spent many, many years in Bougainville, captaining ships, building buildings and running sawmills, etc. And then he became a priest, and he worked there during the crisis. And then he came back to Sydney. And Kevin, for those who knew him, was different. And Kevin had the ability to speak non-stop for several hours. That's not unique, Gary. Well, I would sit and listen to him, Jim, and he would tell stories. It was like a stream of consciousness. He'd tell stories after story, and at the end of each story, and he'd say, and Harry Moore knows bugger all. At the end of each story. And then one time he said, and Harry Moore knows bugger all, and he fell asleep one Anyway, he was a great collector. And he collected all sorts of stuff about Bougainville, although he didn't ever write anything. Even with my goading, he never wrote anything, but he gave me this. And I don't know, Miltrup must have written this as an old sick man when he went back to Germany, all in pidgin. And if I can just tell the people here about pidgin language in New Guinea, there'd be about 600 different languages. And a language evolved that was able all the people to communicate with each other. And it was a rather complex language. Most of the vocabulary came from English, but there were a lot of native words, a lot of European words all thrown in. And the syntax and the grammar were all from native languages. So it was quite, the syntax and the grammar is quite foreign to what we're used to. And so in the early days, as Rudy, you would know, and people here from other cultures would know, you have a sort of an official language, and then you have all these other little Germans around the place, Lower German or whatever you like to call it, you know, before the unification of Germany, before the unification of Italy and so on. You had all these Calabrese and Sicilian and the northern languages, etc., of Italian. And that happened with pidgin. And you had Medang pidgin, you had Bougainville pidgin, you had Bougainville pidgin, and you had Miltrup pidgin. And they standardised it all in 1971. And that was the gold standard. And you know, and not many people, because of the difficulties of the grammar of the syntax, not many white people really master pidgin. But there's one over here, and Chris, okay, that I don't want that to go on a skip when I'm there. So Kevin gave me this book, and I took it back and read it, and I thought, Jingos, the way languages evolve so quickly, they change so quickly. You guys would know that. Rudy, when you go back, you probably find that they speak a little bit different.
It certainly was, yeah.
Okay, well,
See, when I came to Bougainville, I couldn't speak Pidgin, and I couldn't speak English. I came out totally ignorant. Well, after 4 weeks, they sent me on a boat and said, fix that tractor at Terupi. So I had my toolbox, my knapsack, the St. Joseph you mentioned before, dropped me on the beach and left me there. They took off.
that's the way they do
No,
things.
not a soul inside. So I left my toolbox, I took my knapsack and started wandering. I could see the tractor tracks, and I found the mission station and we worked the rest. But then there was no one who spoke German. But we got by, hand and feet, whatever it was, it didn't matter. But we gradually got there. And I've got a little story about Kevin Curry. He was building a house in Chawai for his sisters. And he'd go out there, laid out the framework. In the morning he had this huge long steel tape, and he measured it spot on. So he left it there in the afternoon. He was 2 inches out. Why? The steel tape was lying in the sun.
Kevin, so that was Kevin. So Kevin gave me this and I took it home. And I thought, because language moves so fast, it won't be long before nobody will be able to read this. And so I thought, well, I sat down and translated it, you know, but I'm not computer literate. And I just did it all by longhand, you know, on a piece on the back of A4s that, you know, bills and that. And a lady in Kyogle
We're still happy about that.
would type it up, and then Chris and I met at a Bougainville function, and Chris foolishly put a hand up to edit it, and so this then became, you know, that. This then became that. And so I just, before I hand over to Chris, but I don't know, I think Miltrup must have written this as an old sick man in Germany after he sort of went home to die. And so I think that it's so important for the history to be written by someone who's actually lived it, not someone who comes in, you know, and writes it, you know, an historian who comes in and writes it, but somebody who's actually lived it. And that's why I'm saying to Rudy, an old sick man can do it, mate.
Mosso did it in Latin. He was a chaplain in a hospital and he went back to Germany.
He could have done, but what I'm saying is, you're an old sick man.
I'm not writing a book in pidgin.
Well, write it in some language, because it would be a shame, you know, if all what you're talking about was lost. You know, just such a shame. And so I lay that upon all of you. you know. And everyone has got stories in them, and when you die, the stories will die. So what I'm saying is, please, for the sake of posterity, you know, do it. The other thing that I want to say is this, that nothing happens unless somebody makes it
In
happen.
other parts of the country, different.
And
different.
the person who made this happen is standing right there and deserves a round of applause.
Thank you, Harry.
So how did you become so familiar with Pidgin,
Me,
with the language?
because I was a missionary up there, and I sort of, somehow or other, I got very good at it. And, and I took the trouble to study it.
I mean, did you have lessons as such?
Say again?
Did you have lessons
No.
as such in Pidgin?
I didn't know. But when I went to Coromira, what I did was, Easter was coming up, and all the liturgy is in Pidgin. So I got the teachers to come over, and I just sort of, you know, pronounced it, you know, not really knowing what I was saying, because Pidgin is written phonetically, yeah, and so that you can actually, you know, even though you don't know what you're saying, you can read it. So, but, you know, I got much better than that.
He does know his Pidgin. So, okay. Thank you everyone. I'm going to read, I wrote it. Thank you everyone for being here this evening as we celebrate this team effort really in getting Father Franz Miltrup's memoir into a book form. And special thanks also goes to Rudy and Pat Dreyer for hosting this evening. It was Pat who first suggested it to me about holding a book launch, and I kind of went, oh. You know, I was a bit quite daunted by the prospect of it. But, you know, Pat and Rudy reminded me that this would be a joyful occasion and Franz Miltrup's life was worth celebrating. So, post-COVID, where we can come together, it is an important evening, and I'm so truly grateful. And I'd just like to give a little token to Mr. and Mrs. Dreyer. I'm not sure is Pat here or is she here? Where is Dreyer?
She's somewhere.
Oh, yes. So, no, thank you. Because Pat and Rudy knew Franz Miltrup very well, and they loved him, and they thought that this was an important thing to do. So my family was very close to the Maris community. It was a relationship of friendship and as neighbours dating back to the mid-1950s when my parents Merle and Greg Wall first came to Bougainville. My mother Merle was often unwell in those very first few years with angina and other complications, and an American medical doctor at Tiriki Mission, Sister Mary Leo, advised Mum to have me in Raval. So I was conceived on Bougainville, you're quite right, but I was born in Raval and brought back in a bucka basket on the Catalina 2 weeks after I was 14 days old. A few years later, fast forward, they were on a roper plantation south of Kieta, and again they got to know the Marist and the mission communities in Tubiana, Rigu and Coromira. And Brother Severius, who is mentioned a lot in Franz Miltrup's memoir, I mean, he introduced me as an 11-year-old into stamp collecting and gave me this beautiful little album of all these European stamps, and I think that got Mum going on it as well. So it's a hobby that stayed with me until my adulthood, and Mum, became a mad keen stamp collector. I met Father Miltrup a few times growing up in Bougainville. I remember talking to him one day outside the Arawa Hospital. I'm not sure what we discussed, but I remember his unique conversation style. It was a mixture of Pidgin, English, a bit of Tok Pisin, some German, you know, it was sort of, he had his own style, and if you ever got a chance to read the PNG, the Tok Pisin or Pigeon manuscript, you can see he had his own way of communicating, which was very unique. So as a young person, I didn't know him well, but what was very evident to me was that he was a humble man, dedicated and focused on his responsibilities. When Harry Moore approached me in mid-2021 with the idea of editing Fr Miltrup's Pigeon memoir and helping to put a book together, I was nearly at the end stage of my father's family history. It was my first self-published book, The Wall Family, Weaving the Threads of Memories. So I was very much into convicts and Van Diemen's Land and all that sort of thing. And that project consumed about 3 years of my life, and I was determined to get it done by the end of the year. But even so, Bougainville social history has been a passion of mine, and the prospect of working on Miltrup's memoir was exciting. I jumped at the opportunity. I'm sure Harry envisaged the book to be much smaller than what it turned out to be. But as I read Fr Miltrup's memoir, the manuscript, I couldn't shake the notion that all the Maoris mentioned in the stories also had their own stories of historical interest, and who of the current generation with connections to Bougainville knows about them. So Harry was always very supportive when I broached an idea to him, such as adding sections to the book to swell it up to, it's about 380 pages. You know, I added a section in there to include a brief biography of most of the SMs and the SMSMs, the sisters, that are mentioned throughout the story. And Harry was also very helpful in sourcing photographs from Rome, etc., to go in, and who to contact about getting approval and all that. I confess that there are significant gaps in some of those biographies, largely due to my limitations as a researcher. I was also mindful of other constraints such as ultimate size and cost of the book. So weighing up all these concerns influenced some regrettable omissions, and for that I'm truly sorry. Pulling the writings from Miltrup's main memoir and his war diary was a challenge. There were sections in the Pigeon manuscript without dates, and in places pages out of order and upside down. It was as if a wind had blown in through a window one day, scattering all the loose pages on the floor, and someone saying, we got to get it bound, you know, and the typist has gathered everything up just like this, and that's how it's put together. I'm exaggerating a little bit, but yeah. And I think the page numbers are all being added in by hand later, so that's why you sort of read along. And Harry did a lot of work. It was a huge job to do the initial translation, and then he would have notes about refer to page, you know, you're at page 60, refer to page 78. I think it goes from here to there. You know, turn the book around, you know, so sort of all these sort of instructions on how to navigate. Harry and I have also had many conversations about some sections of the original text. What did Fr Miltrup really mean when he said this? And, you know, because Pidgin is a very metaphorical language. There's probably 30 different ways of saying or describing a scenario, and we wanted the tone right. And I also wanted to make sure that it was Miltrup's voice coming through. So we took a little bit of editorial license in different places by taking some things out that might have been a bit personal, referring to certain people. Another act of editorial license was in the title. Fr Miltrup simply titled it, My 50 Years in Bougainville. And throughout the memoir, he frequently refers to the house Garamuts and the importance they played in relaying messages, and how they were so important culturally in the everyday lives of people in Bougainville. Fr Miltrup knew how to interpret the Garamut when he'd heard it. He knew what the message was saying. It was so-and-so had died, or something, or he knew what those messages were. And it just comes up so frequently. He was a priest first and foremost, but he placed himself squarely in the lives of his parishioners. Garamuts are still important throughout Melanesia, and they reflect how, as a nation modernises, some things remain important to the essence of island societies. So the Garamut found its way into the title, to alert the reader, yourselves, that this is a story of a time and place where culture and custom was important, along with the story of faith, adventure, and peril. So I enjoyed every minute of editing and publishing this book, and to be involved in this undertaking has been a great privilege, and I hope to have done it justice. So please enjoy When the Garamuts Beat.